Meeting of Windsor Carriby Shire Council on the 21st of June 2023 open. Acknowledgement of country. Windsor Carriby Shire Council acknowledge the Gundungurra and Tharawal people as the traditional custodians of this land we now call Windsor Carriby Shire. I pay my respects to elders both past, present and emerging. I would also like to extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders present here or watching today. Statement of ethical obligations. As Administrator, I will undertake the duties of the Office of Administrator in the best interest of the people of the Windsor Carriby Shire area and act faithfully and impartially in carrying out the duties, functions, powers, authorities and discretions vested in me under the Local Government Act 1993 or any other act to the best of my ability and judgment. I am committed to the declaration of conflicts of interest in relation to items listed for consideration on the agenda or which may be considered at this meeting in accordance with the Code of Conduct and the Code of Meeting Practice. Obviously, there are no apologies. Minutes of the May meeting. I would move that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of Council held on 17 May 2023 be adopted as a correct record of the proceedings of the meeting and declare that carried. General Manager, declarations of interest.
There are no declarations, Mr. May.
Thank you, General Manager. I have one administrator minute which I won't read because it was put on the web last night, so the public notices of it has been given, and there are copies available here for anyone who's interested. I would move that the minute be received and noted and the recommendation contained therein be adopted and declare that carried. General Manager, we now move to matters listed for consideration at this meeting, and I'd appreciate if you could bring forward item 9.1, mountain bike riding in natural areas.
Thank you, Mr. May. Mr. Robinson, the Manager Assets, will introduce this item. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, the catalyst for this report has been the recent enhancement and popularity of an unauthorised mountain bike trail in the north-east corner of the Mount Gibraltar Heritage Reserve. Council manages a network of over 3,000 hectares of natural areas across 30 reserves, and so the main task with Council is about finding the balance. Council places high value on the conservation and biodiversity values of these natural areas. However, we also need to provide opportunities for passive and active recreation activities. To better understand the current situation and our community, Council recently ran a Shire-wide survey on mountain bikes and natural areas. The survey was promoted on social media, included within Council's weekly e-news, the Your Say newsletter, as well as sent to all schools and village associations. The survey had the largest response to a Council survey to date, with 535 submissions received. Reviewing the survey results, 60% of all respondents identified as mountain bike riders, and of this 70% find that the current facilities in the Shire don't meet their mountain biking needs or desires. This lines up with 70% of all respondents identifying a desire for more mountain biking opportunities to be facilitated within Council's natural areas. And so it is understood that it's this unmet demand that is the primary driver behind the creation of unauthorised trails in the Shire. And so to therefore address this primary driver, it is recommended that Council endorse the development of a natural areas recreation strategy, which will lead to the development of a mountain biking master plan and, pending receipt of grant funding, an eventual network of Council approved trails. But in the interim, it is clear that a determination needs to be made on the unauthorised trail at Mount Gibraltar. I think to be clear, unauthorised trails are unauthorised development. And so Council has the ability to either decommission the trail on this basis alone, or, given that it is symptomatic of an unmet demand, can investigate and complete a retrospective review of environmental factors to determine if the trail does or does not have a significant impact on the reserve. It's therefore recommended that, given the sensitive nature of this matter, that Council endorse the engagement of a third party to complete this objective review and to install appropriate signage in the interim.
Thank you. Can I just ask one question in relation to Welby Tip? It was raised by a couple of people in the forum that Welby Tip will have the potential, when it's remediated, to have a bike track there. Now, I appreciate it's not a gravity track. Well, I don't think it would work that way. But it's my understanding that even though we're spending, $17 million in remediating something that should have happened years ago, it won't be capped to a standard that would allow bike riding. Is that right?
Mr. May, I may ask the manager project delivery to talk in more detail, but you are correct. The former Welby Tip is due to be remediated. There is a significant cost to that. In terms of the way in which the site will be capped and remediated may well preclude the ability to dig into the soil. I might ask Mr. Tripkovic to just add to that, if I may, Mr. May.
Look, I know this is from left field, but I'm not an expectation builder when you can't deliver on it. And I just want to clarify that.
Mr. May, as part of the closure plan that we are currently designing and specifying for the ultimate result to remediate the site, it is going to be capped and it will be encapsulated. All the nasties will be removed from the site. We are still not certain as to what the final outcome or final use can be, but it is under the premise that we are going to convert it from operational to community land. So I think that does suggest that it does open the door for many options on that site.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. So I don't think it would help a gravity track, but those who may think that it's going to be a bike track on the tip, the old tip site, may still have to use the mountain bike, the fire trails out there, and I know a lot of people use it. In relation to Mount Gibraltar, I read the business papers on the weekend. It's about all I did on the weekend, and I was happy with the officer recommendation until I visited the site for the first time on Monday afternoon with the general manager and two of the directors and Sean, and I was concerned by what I saw, and not only in relation to the works that have taken place there, but I was more concerned about safety and risk issues. Now, when I was young, mountain bike riding I don't think was around, but when I think if my grandkids went there and they weren't good riders, there is a risk posed, and it worries me that if the council was to condone the continued use of that facility that's been constructed there, while it undertakes a process, where does that place the council liability-wise, and where does that place the council officers if there was a tragedy, and where does it place me for agreeing with the recommendation? These are things that are exercising my mind, but at the same time, there is no doubt that mountain bike riding and gravity riding is not going to go away in this shire, and we've got to come up with a solution that is acceptable to all. I hear what people are saying about the environmental risks. I acknowledge the enthusiasm of the boys and girls who have been doing the work there, but I do have a worry in relation to its continued use, given the circumstances. That ride that's been, I don't know if you call them rides, but that's been developed that goes across the creek with the tree lying over it. You know, I would urge any parent whose kids say to them they're going mountain bike riding at Mount Gibraltar to go and have a look first, the parents that is, But that's in no way a criticism of the of what's occurred there, even though I'm not happy with what's occurred there. It's happened, and the council now has to manage it, and I like the pragmatic approach, but I'm just worried with the recommendation. So I'm going to move, and I've already given it to the staff, that subject to the General Manager obtaining legal advice in relation to the continuing use of the unauthorised Mount Gibraltar Heritage Reserve mountain bike trails and associated exposure to risk, the General Manager be delegated authority to implement the officer's recommendations. And in other words, if the General Manager, well, I'll just deal with this first. In other words, if the General Manager obtains advice that the council, in other words, the Wingecarribee community, is not exposed to the risk, if there is a tragedy or anything happens there, I'm happy to run with a recommendation. But I'm not happy to expose the council's administration, who have made the recommendation, and myself, if I adopt it, to what potentially could happen. Now, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but well, you know where I'm coming from, I think, everyone. I'm trying to be as reasonable I can in this matter, but it's something that wasn't really addressed in the report, and it worried me. So I would move that council, subject to the General Manager obtaining legal advice in relation to the continuing use of the unauthorised Mount Gibraltar Heritage Reserve mountain bike trails and associated exposure to risk, the General Manager be delegated authority to implement the officer's recommendation, and that's 1, 2, 3 and 4, and declare that carried. In relation, there is no question 1, 2, 3 and in particular are going to happen. It's unfortunate the timing of the meeting does not allow users to come and make representations, and I acknowledge that as well. You know, we heard from those who do a lot of volunteering and a lot of damn good work on Mount Gibraltar, but I think really the same wasn't allowed for some of the users by virtue of the timing of the meeting. So when we do get into the further studies, and that they will happen in times more favourable to users. Okay, if people want to retire from the meeting now, feel free. If you want to stick around. Okay, we'll go back to the, or actually, Mr. Street, do you want me to deal with that matter earlier, or? Okay, well, we'll just go back to the start of the meeting. Item 7, 8.1, General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. Mr. Park, the Exec Manager, Strategic Outcomes, will introduce this item. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, so this report relates to the review of low-density residential development controls. So by way of background, Council adopted a local housing strategy, and one of the actions that we outlined in that local housing strategy was to try to make it easier for people to submit development applications, having a clearer, more concise planning framework, and particularly for the single dwellings and the alterations and additions to the single dwellings, so often associated with mum and dad type developers. So in undertaking this project, we set out to really simplify the controls. What came out of the consultation we undertook with both the community and industry was identifying some shortcomings within the existing controls. And while we initially set out to really simplify the controls, we ended up changing tack to some degree in that we have wanted to ensure that the controls delivered the outcomes that both the community and industry expected. So what we did in lieu of really simplifying the controls, we actually think we've improved the controls, but to support the DCP amendments, what we've developed is a compliance checklist, which pulls out all of the relevant components of the development control plan into a really easy to use table. So, and as well as developing a template statement of environmental effects, so that, as I said, your mum and dad developers have a single document that they can refer to. They can go through and tick off all of the controls in a really easy to use platform. It's also just important to note that that same compliance checklist will be used by our development assessment staff. So the intention is that we're getting development applications up front that have checked off against all the controls. So we're getting really complete applications up front, and then our assessment staff are using the same checklist in the hope that this will really expedite those smaller development applications. And my understanding is they make up around 85% of all of the applications we receive. So trying to make the smaller applications as streamlined and as fast-tracked as possible. So the report recommends that we proceed to public exhibition of both the development controls as well as that supporting information.
So these are what I call the mum and dad applications.
Yeah, they're the ones.
Yeah. Were all residents who attended the workshops invited to attend the panel when this matter came before it?
Yes, so everyone who participated in any of the consultation sessions, both residents and industry representatives, were notified of both the panel meeting and the council meeting.
Thank you. In relation to item 8.1, review of low-density residential development controls, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 7 of the business paper and declare it carried. Item 8.2, General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. Back to Mr. Park. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. So, Mr. May, this report relates to a planning proposal to amend the Wingecarribee LEP in relation to the clauses that allow for the subdivision of dual occupancies. And the intention of the planning proposal is to reintroduce a restriction on the subdivision of dual occupancies in the Berrima Heritage Conservation Area. Again, by way of background, Council have had for many years overlapping clauses in its local environmental plan. We sought to rectify the overlapping of the clauses. In doing so, the process for finalising LEP amendments is that the Parliamentary Council play around with the wording to get it legalistic at the end. In doing so, they inadvertently removed the restriction on subdivision of dual occupancies in the Berrima Heritage Conservation Area. So this is simply about reintroducing that restriction. We sought to have that amended without needing to go through the planning proposal process because the community never had an opportunity to comment on the removal of that restriction. But the Department and Parliamentary Council's advice was to go back through the planning proposal process to reintroduce that restriction. Just want to be really clear though that it doesn't restrict the construction of dual occupancies anywhere in the Shire. What it does restrict is, well, what it intends to restrict is just the subdivision of those dual occupancies in the Berrima Conservation Area. So people will still be able to build dual occupancies like they can build secondary dwellings, but the reason why the restriction applies to the Berrima Conservation Area is because one of the really important characteristics of that conservation area is the historic Hoddle subdivision plan. So while we want to allow housing diversity and these smaller housing products, we want to protect the integrity of that Hoddle plan, so restricting subdivision of dual occupancies.
Ms Hopplewell made a substantive submission during the public forum. Did anything in that submission sway you to change your recommendation?
No, I think that.
Thank you. In relation to item 8.2, I don't want to be rude, but I just want to make sure, because I said I would find that out. In relation to 8.2, planning proposal to amend clauses in the planning document, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on pages 52 and 53 of the business paper and declare that carried. We've dealt with mountain bike riding. I thought the decision was quite clear, and that is, let's find out legally what the risks are in particular, and then take it from there. 9.2, draft community and recreation facility study, General Manager. Is there someone to address this?
There is.
Yeah. I would move the standing orders be look, in fairness to Mr. Street, we might just deal with the Mittagong Playhouse first. I'm sorry, but you indicated this would be 10 minutes, yeah. In which case, Mittagong Playhouse is page 100. General Manager, Mittagong Playhouse.
Thank you, Mr. May. So the Manager, Project Delivery, Mr. Tripkovic, will introduce this item. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, the purpose of this report is to provide an update in relation to the investigations undertaken for the Mittagong Memorial Hall as requested in your Administrator's Minute dated 19 April 2023. Following the closure of the Playhouse in October 2019, due to numerous structural deficiencies, an emergency make-safe EP&A order was enacted. This resulted in an engineering approach to support and preserve the southern heritage stone wall of the building and prevent any further damage. These are the large steel props and bracing we still see there today. Staff, stakeholders and user groups swiftly commenced the design development process to rectify and refurbish the building. In accordance with the Environmental Protection Order, only the make-safe elements were permissible, and that any and all other works on the building would be subject to a development application. As with any development application, all legislative and building code requirements need to be addressed. In parallel, Council has submitted numerous grant applications for the refurbishment of the Mittagong Memorial Hall, all of which have been unsuccessful to date, and the project is still currently unfunded. During the design process, an investigation was undertaken in relation to staging the works. Options to perform the structural repairs and refit the playhouse were considered. It became evident that this would not be achievable, considering the requirements under the development application's condition of consent. To obtain an occupancy certificate, all compliance matters identified in the conditions of consent would need to be addressed, which include access and egress requirements, vertical transport, fire engineering compliance, and all heating, cooling and ventilation. To achieve this, total reconstruction of the building would need to be undertaken, and as such, the fully estimated amount of funding would be necessary. To undertake works to remedy the structural faults and remove the external propping, an estimate of $1.3 million was established based on the detailed design for the structural repair. Whilst this work would reinstate approximately 8 car parking spots and remove the unsightly propping, it would not allow for the reuse of the hall. With the considerable costs associated with mobilisation and demobilisation for a staged approach, and the fact that the initial stage would not provide a usable facility, it is suggested that Council effectively administer their funds and continue to focus on obtaining grants to completely refurbish the hall. In relation to the current state of the building, as suggested in the public forum, a lot of deconstruction works were undertaken to determine the structural failures. All of these are proposed to be rectified as part of the refurbishment scope, inclusive of invasive investigations that we undertook to better inform the design and to find out all the hidey holes within the building that, from experience, that can catch us out. All of this will be rectified as part of the main scope. The leaky roof and the holes in the roof, we have witnessed and we have seen that in the roof sheeting. All of the internals are proposed to be refurbished as part of the overall program of works. Furthermore, there were comments made in relation to why can't council just move funding from the favourable tender box? Whilst we did receive a favourable tender box for the animal shelter and SES, this is only one element of project costing. We do have to consider council fees, resourcing costs, design costs. There are numerous elements that make up the overall project cost. And if savings are ultimately realised, council's financial officers will duly look at opportunities to reallocate these funds.
If the $1.3 million was expended early, would that be wasted when we did all the work?
Mr. Mayor, ultimately would not be wasted, as this would make up part of the overall scope anyhow, but there is a lot of cost associated with mobilisation and demobilisation, setting up a site, de-establishing a site, and having to do that multiple times, and that is in the order of hundreds of thousands of dollars.
I think it was Gay White said, some things keep her awake at night. Mittagong Playhouse keeps me awake at night because it can't be let go as it is. It's just really as simple as that. And I'm very confident all the staff are well aware of the issues and the expectations. When will the DA be approved?
From what I understand, it's imminent. It's any time now.
Panel or delegated authority?
It's going to the local planning panel, I think.
Oh, next Wednesday. Oh, that's good. If I could ask a finance request in relation to the disappearance of the $2 million, which I knew happened, and for good reason. What is the capacity in the forward financial plan to return that $2 million if necessary?
We would review it depending on the timing of when the project and the grant funding does become available. We would review our priorities and bring those funds forward. That was always the intention, to include it back into when funding was incorporated.
Look, it's a question I've been asking too in relation to the $2 million. You just don't have public money sitting in a box and not being used for something when you know you have the capacity to bring it back in, and the capacity is there. In relation to grant funding, both Judy Hannon and Stephen Jones have agreed to meet with us at the Mittagong Playhouse in different dates in July. They are both conscious of the priority of this matter. I actually said to Judy Hannon, I think at the northern end of the electorate, it's our priority at the moment. We've got it just can't be left as it is. But the General Manager might want to offer some comment on that, because we actually spoke to Mr Jones about it in Canberra again.
We did indeed. So just thank you, Mr May, further to Mr Street's query about grants. So even though we didn't have a permanent grants officer, we do have people still writing grants, and we have actually recruited a permanent grants officer. One of the items, as the Administrator said, we met with Mr Jones last Thursday in Canberra, and we raised the Mittagong Playhouse. There is a funding program that's opening from the federal government on the 4th of July. It's an EOI process, then to a full application, and we're intending to submit the Playhouse for that program. It's a 50-50 funding program. Our current cost estimates for the Mittagong Playhouse are in the order of $8 million, so we'd be looking at a $4 million grant, and that is something we'll be discussing with Mr Jones. And we've also had discussions, as Mr May mentioned, with the state member for Wallandilly, Judy Hannon, about the state also contributing with the view, if we could, aim for a 50% from federal, 25 and 25 state and local. So that's the plan, and we're working hard to achieve that. Thank you.
And in relation to not having a grants officer at the moment. That's not my issue, it's an administrative matter. However, I would just say there's horses for courses when it comes to grant writing, and you may be assured that any grant that goes from this council to both levels of government is very professionally done, and occasionally you get third-party assistance. That's the way it works. Having said that, I would move that a further report be submitted by the General Manager on funding and grant opportunities to undertake the Mittagong Memorial Hall refurbishment, and declare that carried. That keeps the matter active. Thank you. Okay, we now go back to the draft community and recreation strategy study. I would move the standing orders be suspended in order to hear Ms. Tina Chappell of the Astrolab Group address Council in relation to item 9.2, draft community and recreation facility strategy and study for public exhibition, and declare that carried. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. While Ms. Chappell's making her way up to the lectern, this project was commissioned last year, and it's been a joint project between the manager assets, Mr. Robinson, and the manager or executive manager strategic outcomes, Mr. Park. Ms. Chappell's from Astrolab, as Mr. May mentioned, and will provide a very brief overview on the key findings in the strategy and key projects arising, and then Mr. Robinson will talk and introduce the item. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Good evening, everyone. If I can get the technology to work. Turning it on always helps. Yep. So firstly, just in terms of the document relationship and how the strategy actually aligns to other documents of council, the strategy has an alignment both up and down. So up in terms of the Wingecarribee Community Strategic Plan, linking to the 2.1 strategic direction of our people have the opportunity for healthy, happy lifestyles. And then importantly, it also goes down to the work undertaken by the Treadwell Management Group in terms of the assessment of the current infrastructure for the Shire, in terms of the needs study, and also project facility requirements. So the strategy talks directly to this Treadwell study and then up through to the Community Strategic Plan as well. Just briefly in terms of how the document's been structured, the document is underpinned by planning principles that are very much recreation planning-based planning principles that look to ensure that the optimum use of the facility is provided for. The second tier of the strategy looks at priority projects. So these are projects that were identified as important to the Shire, and that's reflected through the community engagement outcomes as well. The third level of the strategy is around actions, and we've split those into two areas. So there's actions that apply generally across the Shire, and also specific precinct actions that apply to the 11 planning precincts. So the precinct actions are much more locally based, whereas the actions for the Shire are more relevant to across the Shire and opportunities for the Shire in general. The last level there, which I've noted, is business as usual. So some of the outcomes from the Treadwell study were considered to be works that should be considered business as usual, such as maintenance activities. So they haven't been reflected as specific actions in the strategy, but they will be picked up through business as usual activities. So I mentioned very briefly the planning principles. So these are the principles that have informed the study. So this has come from the Treadwell Management document that they produced. As I mentioned, very much focused around recreation planning principles, looking at the best use for facilities, maximising community access to facilities, and also being very cognisant of the ongoing costs of operation for council as well. So I'll jump straight into the priority projects. So there are 3 priority projects identified in the strategy, the first of which is the aquatics provision across the Shire. As you're probably aware, there's 4 facilities in the Shire at the moment, one of which is not operable, which is the Mittagong site. The community engagement very much emphasised a desire to have all year round facility, particularly in the northern part of the LGA. You do have a wonderful facility here in Mossvale, but there's definitely an opportunity to maximise the provision of aquatics for the Shire. The strategy recommends the development of a regional level facility towards the northern part of the Shire, and from a catchment perspective that would ensure year-round coverage for residents in the key population areas of both Barrel and Mittagong, and for the growth areas towards the north as well. The strategy also recommends the repurposing of the Mittagong site due to the flooding issues there and appropriateness for the type of facility. It is recommended that it be looked at for additional recreation purposes, just not an aquatic facility of that nature. And the last recommendation in terms of aquatics is around the Bundanoon pool and recommending an investigation into the feasibility of that asset. That asset is currently at the end of its life cycle, so it's not recommended that it be redone until such time as that investigation has been undertaken to weigh up the community and financial benefits of undergoing those works. The second priority project is in relation to indoor recreation facilities. Again, the Mossvale area is well serviced with the Mossvale basketball indoor recreation facility. The strategy does recommend, however, a provision of a larger multi-purpose indoor facility, again towards the north of the LGA to service the Barrel, Mittagong and Hilltop precincts and area. And to investigate the potential to provide these as part of integrated community hubs, which is very much a planning principle in terms of recreation provision and provides optimisation and use for the community. The third area of priority projects that was investigated was around destination play spaces. Again, something that came through very clearly in terms of the community engagement was the desire to have bigger and better facilities, and facilities that encouraged all-day use, such as barbecue facilities, shade structures, etc. The recommendation in the strategy looks to provide 2 destination play spaces, one in the Mossvale precinct and one in Mittagong area, which would provide an anchor at the north and the south of the local government area, and to look for opportunities through the central part through Barrel, Burradoo to upgrade facilities as part of ongoing maintenance and improvement works. Shire-wide actions is the next part. I won't go through these verbatim, but in essence, as I mentioned, they cover generically across the Shire, include things such as childcare centres and advocacy for those things. It also identifies opportunity areas for the Shire, and there's 2 spotlights that we've kind of identified as opportunity areas, one of which is equestrian, and the second of which is cycling for the Shire as well. That in conjunction with recreational tourism and the visitor economy are opportunities for the Shire to maximise their existing facilities and infrastructure, to also get additional visitor economy into the Shire as well. I've just put a little bit of a graphic from the document there in terms of the spotlight on cycling. I think it's fair to say from a multidisciplinary perspective, Wingecarribee has nearly every type of infrastructure to support different disciplines within cycling. It's on the edge of Sydney. It's a massive opportunity area, the biggest growth sport across the world over the last 5 years, so a big opportunity there. And the last level is the precinct actions. Again, I won't go through all of the different precinct actions, but just to give you a feel for how it's set out. So it provides a map and overview of the precinct, including what the facilities are currently in those precincts, what was heard during the community engagement process, identifying key opportunities at a precinct level, and then lastly, the precinct's specific actions that will be implemented over the coming years. And just by way of summary, the strategy is a long-term guide to investment and programming. It's not a short-term strategy. It should be implemented across 10 to 20 years in terms of council's ongoing infrastructure. It's aligned to consider population growth and community expectations into the future, and we'll see throughout the implementation of the process more community engagement and feedback as part of the delivery of the strategy. That's the end of the presentation. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. Were you here for the earlier discussion? You were. This matter, in my view, the study, as distinct from the strategy, raises more questions than it has answers. But having said that, I think we've got to move forward. But to try and pull all this together, I've spent considerable time with the staff so that the community has confidence in the bigger picture of what's trying to be achieved, because the bottom line is there was a complete lack of strategic planning in this organisation, and trying to deal with these matters is complex. And you'd appreciate just how complex it is. And like a lot of other people who have spoken to me about this community and recreation facilities strategy got confused with the arts and cultural plan in sections, but council already has an arts and cultural plan, so it's difficult. But look, we've got to move forward. I would move that. Sorry, General Manager.
Thank you, Ms. Chappell. Appreciate your time and appreciate your presentation. I believe we need procedurally we need to go back into the meeting, and then Mr. Robinson will formally introduce the item. So thank you.
I would move that standing orders be suspended and we return to open council, and we'll declare that carried. General Manager, item 9.2.
Yes. Now, Mr. Robinson, thank you.
My apologies, Sean.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. Mays, as communicated, Ordinary Council meeting 26th of April, Council engaged Treadwell Management Services and Astrolab Group to complete a community and recreation facility study and strategy. At the request of Council, there has been additional information provided as part of the release of the study and strategy, and that has been included as part of this latest report. The data from Treadwell study does provide a comprehensive capture of Council's community and recreation facilities, as well as identifying demands and trends. And this has been pulled together in the subsequent strategy from Astrolab to deliver a more concise strategic document that is quite readable for our community while still remaining robust and evidence-based. After the proposed adoption of the study and strategy, it is proposed that the business cases for a regional aquatic centre, sports hub and destination play space are commenced. It's therefore recommended that Council endorse these documents for public exhibition.
Thank you. And look, the challenge is playing catch-up. But there are, in my view, opportunities. So look, I'm going to move that Council endorse the draft community and recreational facilities strategy for public exhibition, and in support of same, agrees with the draft community and recreational facilities study being concurrently exhibited, and a further report be provided following the exhibition period. And number 2, the General Manager report to Council on the strategic and infrastructure reports required to support the delivery of outcomes in the local strategic planning statement, local housing strategy, and this report include timelines and funding to be included in the delivery program and long-term financial plan at the September 2023 review. And I declare that carried. The intent of number 2 is to make sure that when the Council comes back in September 2024, they have all the information available to hit the ground running. And this is an opportunity to play catch-up. And that's what we're trying to do. And I would hope that report will be very clear so residents and potential candidates can see what we're trying to achieve. The next item is Children's Services Business Model Review. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. The Manager of Business and Property Services, Mr. Clovis, will introduce this item. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Good afternoon, Mr. Administrator, colleagues and those in the gallery. The purpose of the report this afternoon is to present the proposed direction for the family daycare and out-of-school hours care services going forward. Mr. Mayor, allow me to set a high-level situation perhaps first prior to discussing the reviews and the implication of the proposals, as I appreciate that our attempts to include as much information as possible in our item might make it difficult to follow and get a bigger picture perhaps. Wingecarribee Council operates two kinds of child-focused services. The first is called outside of school hours care, and that can be thought of as basically a service looking after children before and after school until the parents can come around and pick them up. The second sort of service that we provide is called family daycare. Family daycare service private providers and contractors subscribed or are part of a scheme of many providers, and schemes can be public, all schemes can be private. In our council there are obviously our public scheme, but there's a number of private schemes. The way that works is that the contractors or the private providers look after children in their own homes, typically from the morning to say 6 to 6. So these providers are private contractors. They run their own businesses, and they can decide on a whim which scheme they are part of. So those are the two main, the two sorts of services we run. Since 2019, Council would know the organisation ran a number of reviews on many different departments, and these two departments, family daycare, I'll call it FTC, and out of school hours, I'll call it USH, but no different. So these two functions had their own reviews, or a review taking care of both of them, I guess. In the report presented this afternoon, I've included a table detailing the recommendations of the review with a column saying whether we accept it, reject it, or maybe some commentary to that. I take that as read. What we've also done is try to be proactive as to any of the perhaps objections to what we are proposing and try to address those. The reports though do contain a common theme or common themes. The biggest one was the shortage of educators. So when I say the word educators, those are the people, the private business operators, the private contractors that decide on which scheme they want to be part of. So there's a number of them out there. They choose to which schemes they form part of, and we've got no power over them. They can come and they can go as they please. Over many years, the Wingecarribee Family Daycare, FTC, scheme has seen a reduction in these private providers being part of our schemes. And currently, as we're sitting here, we've got no providers in that scheme. So that scheme is, call it empty. Over the past couple of years, Council has, and the providers themselves, one can imagine that it's no fun being part of a really small and a scheme getting smaller and smaller. So we, as well as our providers, have tried to get more people on board. We've had a number of advertising campaigns, and private providers have banners that they put up in play parks to try and get people to approach them and talk to them about looking after children. So from currently where we are, not only the reports, but also staff as well as our providers who have all left our scheme are of the opinion that it's very, very unlikely that we will end up having more people come onto our scheme, seeing as over time people have left our scheme. So seeing as our scheme have gone smaller and smaller and now have no one in it, chances that we will get up to having people in our scheme, but not only that, trying to get those people up to a level where that department obviously have costs, and that would break even. That is just not going to happen, unfortunately. It's not something that we foresee, unfortunately. Now, The reports done that I'm reporting on have consulted not only our staff, but people on the waiting list, waiting for services, people in services, the educators, the private providers, all of those people. And I think it's very fair to say that everyone is disappointed that this is where it's ended up. However, the reality is that our scheme have got no one in it at the moment, and the trend over long term has been coming down. I'd like to, I guess, just acknowledge the proud work of our staff in that area that over a long time, against the background of ever reducing numbers of their clients, done an absolutely marvellous job. So we are planning to retain all of those staff. Perhaps a fitting final comment would be that change is always difficult. However, as council progress on its continuous improvement journey, we'll see a lot of change still in future.
So what you're saying is that the providers are in effect small business people who can do whatever they want.
Yes.
Can local government boundaries don't count, do they, in this kind of stuff?
No, Mr. May. One of the solutions that we pursued was to talk with other local government schemes, and obviously some of them had the ability to take over some of our small business contractors, should those people wanted to join those schemes. So yeah,
this is happening in many local government areas across the state. I think, yeah.
If I may,
Yeah, go for your life.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Cloffers. So just with family daycare, as you pointed out, Mr. May, family daycare educators are, for all intents and purposes, self-employed, and they can choose which schemes they join, or they may wish to operate as a private operator. Local government, we're very fortunate in that we have other schemes that are adjoining us, that if our educators wish to, they can join because the boundaries no longer apply. It used to 20 years ago, it doesn't now. I guess the other important part of this report is the outside school hours care service, which is strong, and what's intended or proposed in this report is that we also look to expand that service type into the future. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope the acting CFO has picked up the $114,651 for next Wednesday. If you want to see me on Friday, I'll be meeting with 355 committees, and I can help you with it. In relation to item 9.3, Children's Services Business Model Review, I'd move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 89 of the business paper, 1, 2, 3 and 4, and declare that carried. Thank you. 9.5, the Community Assistance Program.
Thank you, Mr. May. The Director of Communities and Place, Mr. Davis, will introduce this item. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, the Community Assistance Scheme encourages the development of community initiatives in line with the Wingecarribee Shire Council's Community Strategic Plan, Wingecarribee 2041. The scheme aims to build capacity, encourage participation and support initiatives that promote partnerships and working together to maintain our community and its assets. $120,000 is allocated towards community initiatives that support arts and culture, community development and sport and recreation. In addition, a further $10,000 is funded out of the environmental levy for environment and sustainability projects. Projects under the scheme need to demonstrate that they benefit or support local cultural, sporting, welfare, health promotion, community development and leisure facilities and activities, or the natural environment and sustainability. Under the policy adopted in November last year, the scheme provides for 3 categories: small donations up to $600, community grants of up to $7,000, and environmental and sustainability grants of up to $2,000. The 2023-24 Wingecarribee Community Assistance Scheme was opened on Wednesday the 1st of March and closed to applications on Friday the 14th of April. As part of the Community Assistance Scheme, in this financial year, a total of 37 applications total of 37 applications were received for grants and donation with a total request of $156,400. 10 donations and 20 community grants have been assessed as suitable and are recommended, totaling an amount of just under $120,000. The Environment and Sustainability Community Assistance Scheme was opened on the 17th of April and closed on the 15th of May this year. And as part of the scheme, the Environment and Sustainability grants, there was a total of 12 applications were received, and a total request of just over $23,000. 7 environmental grants are recommended at a total cost of approximately $10,000. In addition to, Mr. May, it's recommended it is recommended as per the report. If I can get my paperwork right. It is recommended as per the report that Council provide a 2023-24 Community Assistance Scheme donation to the community organisations listed. That Council provide a 2023-2024 Community Assistance Scheme grant to the following community organisations listed in the report. That it be noted that a total of $119,639 has been provided to the scheme of the $120,000 budget allocation. And 4, that Council provide a 2023-24 Community Assistance Scheme grant for environment and sustainability projects to the community organisations listed in the report. Number 5, that it be noted that a total of $10,000 has been provided to the environment and sustainability category within the $10,000 budget allocation. 6, that successful applicants be advised in writing and invited to attend a formal cheque presentation held in Local Government Week on Wednesday the 2nd of August this year. And 7, that unsuccessful applicants be advised in writing of the outcome of their application and be provided with feedback for the next round of applications next year.
Thank you. The report says they're all incorporated bodies. What do we have in place to ensure that do we get copies of their last financial report before these checks have passed over?
That's correct. We, as part of the application process, we require their audited financial statements, and if they're not required to produce audited financial statements, a statement of their financial income and expenditure for the past financial year. That's one of the checks that we do, or that's one of the requirements of part of the application process. And then in addition to that, we do ABN checks of the groups. We also have the guidelines require us to confirm or to receive receipts and do progress payments for the grants, so that they are part of the process.
And we're dealing with public money, obviously. What internal probity processes were in place for the allocation of this money?
Mr. Administrator, the guidelines are what we work to, and so...
No.
Sorry.
But where the applications are assessed, there are strict probity guidelines?
through you, Mr. May, there is a panel. So when the applications come in, they come in through a pre-registered email. Then they're assessed by staff, a panel of staff that assess against the guidelines, against the policy, and then those are then checked by the relevant manager, and then it's then reported to council. So it's not one person's decision. There are a number of checkpoints along the way.
And I've got to ask this question. I noted that the Rotary Club of Moss Vale charity golf day, $7,000.
I might answer if that's all right with the director. So the purpose of that grant was to bring the community together to raise funding for the charity, and that being around youth projects and scholarships, musical instruments for schools, and the Can Assist charity. This would effectively involve a $7,000 grant, which contributes to an estimated $30,000 in funding raised for the charity. So it goes to three projects.
So the 7,000 is part of the 30,000. Thank you. And that's not a criticism of Rotary. I think they do a great job. But I was just interested when I read that one. In relation, pardon me, to item 9.5, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on pages 103 and 104, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7, and declare that carried. Draft bus shelter advertising policy, General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. Mr. Robinson, Manager Assets, will introduce the item. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, the purpose of this report is to provide Council with an update on the management of bus shelters and seek endorsement to proceed with public exhibition of the draft bus shelter advertising policy. As per the previous resolutions of Council, all 370 public bus stops in the Shire have been inspected, and although found mostly to be in sound condition, only 6% can be fully considered to be accessibly compliant. Improving the accessibility of bus stops, as well as the provision of further bus shelters and ensuring regular maintenance, does require significant financial investment from Council. And so to help assist in offsetting these costs, a draft bus shelter advertising policy has been developed to enable revenue to be generated through commercial advertising being permitted on bus shelters. It's therefore recommended that Council endorse the draft bus shelter advertising policy to be placed on public exhibition for a period of 28 days.
So this is stage one of a process that could potentially allow the Council to get a public tender for the provision of new bus shelters.
Correct. Upon final adoption, proposed adoption of the advertising policy, an open EOI or RFT could be released for expressions of interest to be submitted.
And have you identified where shelters should be and where they're redundant?
So as part of the review, as Resolution 2, it's proposed for Council to adopt a provision level of service for new bus shelters to only be provided within town centres, village centres and along state roads that are serviced by a public bus route. As noted, there are 320 bus stops for just public bus routes alone. It's simply not viable to have a bus shelter at every location, and so this was found to be the closest fit in terms of a pattern of current provision, as well as what can be a sustainable level moving forward.
Because I think Windsor Caribbee's bus shelters are far from accessibility compliant, and really in this day and age it's unacceptable. In relation to item 9.6, I'd move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 115 of the business paper, 1, 2 and 3, and declare that carried. General Manager, the hardship policy repeal.
Thank you, Mr. May. To the Acting CFO, Mr. Conrad.
Thanks, General Manager. Council adopted the debt recovery policy after 28 days of public exhibition on 17 May 2023. The new policy incorporates Council's provision for hardship with the intention to replace the existing hardship policy of November 2011. The existing hardship policy was not expressly repealed as part of the adoption of the debt recovery policy, and this council report recommends the hardship policy of November 2011 be repealed. Thanks.
Thanks very much. In relation to the hardship policy, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 128 of the business paper and declare that carried. Southern Highlands Local Business Awards.
Yep, thank you, Mr. May. Mr. Arthur, the Manager, Environment and Sustainability. Thank you.
Mr. May, the purpose of this report is to advise Council of an outgoing sponsorship opportunity with the Southern Highlands Local Business Awards and to seek a resolution on the response to this offer. The Southern Highlands Local Business Awards are an annual business awards program and is regarded as one of the major business events for the local area where the public participate in nominating their favourite businesses. Council has been a sponsor of these awards since 2012, and through the sponsorship, through the support, the award organiser provides an award category of excellence in environmental sustainability. This category provides the opportunity for local businesses to nominate and receive recognition for their achievements in this area. The report reflects on the governance issues surrounding Council's grants, donations and sponsorship policy, and it does note, and the report notes, that it is an unsolicited proposal and would be an exception to this policy. While this may be the case, there is merits to the proposal given, and given that it is a low-level contribution, and it supports an environmental sustainability business. I beg your pardon. While this is the case, there is merit to the proposal given it is a low-level contribution and it supports an environment sustainability business award that is exclusive to the Shire's businesses.
Thank you. In relation to item 9.8, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 130 of the business paper 1 and 2 and declare that carried. General Manager, 9.9 Highlands Fest.
Yep, thank you, Mr. May. The Director, Corporate Strategy and Resourcing, Ms. Foster, will speak to this item. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, in April 2022, the Department of Regional New South Wales announced its $25 million Reconnecting Regional New South Wales Community Program. The program's purpose was to reconnect communities and facilitate economic recovery in their local areas. The non-competitive grant of $287,582 was allocated to Council to hold a signature event. Council consulted with the community to select a name for the event and the date that would be most suitable. Highlands Fest was the most popular name, and the 4th of March 2023 was selected as the most appropriate date. The aim of Highlands Fest was to promote community bonding and social cohesion by bringing together residents from different backgrounds, ages and interests to a single local event. Provided an opportunity for community members to interact, connect and strengthen social bonds. The event was to foster a sense of belonging, unity and a shared identity within the community. In planning for Highlands Fest, there was a focus on providing broad entertainment options to cater for families, teenagers and adults. Given the size of the venue being Bong Bong Racecourse, it was decided to have 2 stages. This would enable a full day of activities and performances for all ages and give more opportunities for local talent to perform. A headline act for both stages was sought. Bluey and Bingo was engaged for the children's stage and Eskimo Joe engaged for the adult stage, with the rest of the performers on both stages were local. A marquee was also provided for local producers and local food vans and provided food and drinks throughout the day. 6,000 tickets were made available for locals and 100 family Bluey and Bingo meet and greet tickets, in addition to the Bluey and Bingo interactive show. All tickets were taken up and 4,200 people attended on the day. Great feedback was received, with some quotes that are attached to this report.
Thank you, Mr. May. The Manager Governance and Corporate Performance will introduce this item. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. This report recommends Council adopt a process for acting arrangements for periods when the General Manager is on leave. Advice has been sought from the Office of Local Government, who has advised that many councils adopt a standing resolution nominating several directors who may act in the role of General Manager when the General Manager is on leave. Based on this advice, it's recommended that when the General Manager is on leave, planned or unplanned, one of the three directors will temporarily be appointed to the position of Acting General Manager.
While I agree with the principle, I don't agree with the advice from OLG. I would move that when the General Manager is absent, as distinct to temporarily unavailable, one of the directors be temporarily appointed to the position on recommendation of the General Manager to the Mayor/Administrator. So take out Council adopt a standing resolution that. And when you're done that, sing out, because another little one. Ready? Oh, sorry. Take out after one of the directors, take out the will. Just simply be temporarily. Declare that carried. Next item, this is a good one. Item 9.11, Wingecarribee Animal Shelter and the SES.
Thank you, Mr. May. We don't have favourites. The Manager Project Delivery, Mr. Tripkovic, will speak to this item. Thank you.
Thanks again, General Manager. Mr. May, the purpose of this report is to present the evaluation of the request for tender for the Wingecarribee Animal Shelter and Mossville Branch SES project. In consultation with staff, volunteers and stakeholders, Council has developed the detailed design for both the animal shelter and the SES facility. Extensive investigations were undertaken into class-leading facilities such as the Animal Welfare League in Kemps Creek, the home of the popular TV show The Doghouse, and subsequent peer reviews undertaken to ensure a fit-for-purpose and compliant facility. Additionally, Council worked closely with the SES to develop and detail their new standard modular design facility. The development application has been lodged and approved for the project with a minor modification currently pending. A capital expenditure review and business case has also been submitted to the Office of Local Government. Based on the detailed design and specification, a tender was advertised from 28 March to 16 May 2023. A total of 3 tender submissions were received and all conforming in relation to the mandatory and non-price criteria. Tender prices ranged from 6.94 million to 8.77 million. All tenders were considered in accordance with the Local Government Act, the regulations and Council's procurement policy. The Council Procurement Officer was also part of the process to manage probity in procurement. The 3 compliant tender submissions all demonstrated an understanding of the requirements and experience with similar construction projects. Pooch Constructions and Building Proprietary Limited were evaluated as the most advantageous tender submission. It is therefore recommended that Council resolve to enter into a contract with Pooch Construction and Building for the Wingecarribee Animal Shelter and Mossville Branch SES projects for a lump sum price of $6.94 million, inclusive of GST. I would also like to take this opportunity to extend Council's gratitude for the ongoing support and collaborative input provided by all volunteer groups associated with the animal shelter and the volunteers and officers of the New South Wales State and Emergency Service.
Building on what Mr. Street said in relation to what's in the budget, and I think it's 9, or in that order, because I raised it with your budget time, There is obviously a saving here, but I think it's important that in future with tenders, we note the additional costs that make up those amounts, because we know there's costs associated with consultants and all the work you have to do, the architects, etc., etc. I just think it's not the cost of the 6.9, and I see in Old South Road people are saying, that we're going over budget. Well, we're miles under budget, and you're going to be able to do a lot more work. But I think that it's just important to raise those issues. The same thing happened in Station Street. So I just think it's important to put that into the reports as well, so that people, when they see in the quarterly financial statement it's over that amount, there's an appreciation of why. But anyhow, I think well done to all with this one. I would move in relation to item 9.10, the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 180 of the business paper 1, 2 and 3, and declare that carried. Barrel Tennis Club. General Manager. No introduction. In relation to item 9.12, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 186 of the business paper 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, and declare that carried. 9.13 Range Road. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. Mr. McCulloch, Ms. It's been a long day. Ms. McCulloch, Coordinator Property Services, will introduce this item. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, this report relates to the acquisition of land for road purposes affecting 4 properties at Range Road, Glencorrie. Council is undertaking road upgrade works to Range Road between George Emery Lane and Tourist Road, Glencorrie. As part of those works, the road reserve requires slight widening in several locations. Council officers have been in contact with all affected landowners to discuss the upgrade and acquisition process. This report seeks the necessary resolutions to enable Council to commence negotiations with the affected property owners.
Yep, again to Ms. McCulloch. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, the purpose of this report is to seek Council resolution to proceed with the closure of road reserve that runs through 70 Drapers Road, Collar Vale. The subject road has an area of approximately 10,741 square metres. Following Council resolution, the proposed closure was placed on public exhibition for a period of 4 weeks. During the period of consultation, 5 submissions were received, 3 objecting to the proposal and 2 in support. An issue of concern related to evacuation from the area in case of bushfire. The Rural Fire Service has been consulted and advised that, given the highly vegetated and disused state of the road, they did not consider this to be a safe evacuation route in case of bushfire emergency. Accordingly, the RFS have advised they have no objection to the proposed closure.
Thank you. In relation to item 9.10, Drapers Road, I'd move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 202 of the business paper 1, 2, 3 and 4, and declare that carried. General Manager, Suter Road.
The final one. Thank you, Ms. McCulloch.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, the Local Government Act requires that all public land must be classified as either community or operational. In accordance with the terms of the Local Government Act, before a council acquires land or within 3 months after it acquires land, council must resolve that the land be classified as either community or operational. The lots the subject of this report were acquired for the Moss Vale Bypass project, with settlement taking place in April and May this year. As the lots were acquired for road purposes, this report recommends classification as operational land.
Do we now own all the land in the corridor that is necessary to build it?
Yes, that's correct. These were the last lots.
Thank you. In relation to item 9.15, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 211 of the business paper 1 and 2, and declare that carried. The investments report, there's no introduction. In relation to item 9.16, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 216 of the business paper and declare that carried. And 9.17, country mayors, no introduction. I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 224 of the business paper and declare that carried. There's no other listed items. General Manager, any late items?